What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in one of our recent videos we went over a dangerous response against e4 in which we play e5, and against the move knight f3 the most popular responses are knight c6, d6 with the Philidor Defense, and knight f6 with the Petrov. But guys, in our recent video we went over the crazy off-key move d5 with the Elephant Gambit, and in that video we covered the strategy, principles, and theory behind the Elephant Gambit, but in today's video, we're going to be seeing the Elephant Gambit in action as we go over a game played by FM Stefan Buecker with the black pieces, going against none other than the former world champion Boris Spassky, the 10th world champion with the white pieces. Yes, guys, someone had the nerve to play the Elephant Gambit against a world champion, and in this position, we now see from Boris Spassky, e takes d5, accepting the pawn, and as covered in our last video, whenever white plays e takes d5, we're going to push with e4, putting some pressure on the knight on f3. And now the most popular option for white is to play queen e2, pinning the pawn on e4. So obviously we can't take the knight now, but we defend it with the move knight f6. And after knight c3, we play bishop e7, reintroducing the threat of e takes f3. And following knight takes e4, we're not going to take the knight on e4 and trade down, but we're going to play knight takes d5. And really, no matter what white does here, we're going to castle kingside. And now white is in a little bit of a strange predicament. White would love to castle kingside, but the bishop on f1 is in the way. So here Boris Spassky plays queen d1, looking to give the bishop some room on e2. But now from the Fide Master Buecker, we see f5, and after knight g3, c5, pushing the pawns up the board, fighting for space. And following bishop e2, we now have knight c6, and after castling kingside g5, what on earth is Buecker doing here? I mean, this is not normal chess, guys. I would usually not recommend playing f5 and g5 literally right in front of your king on g8. However, in the Elephant Gambit, we are playing to checkmate the opponent's king. There's no other way around it. I don't care if you're playing a 500 level player or if you're playing Boris Spassky. We have to go for the opponent's king, or else the Elephant Gambit doesn't really work. Following rook e1, we now see f4 continuing to push the pawns down the board, attacking the knight on g3, and after knight e4, bishop f5, naturally developing the bishop and putting some pressure on that center knight on e4. And now after the move h3, preventing g4, further pushing the pawns, now black has an interesting situation. I mean, most of black's pieces are pretty active, so how can black improve the positioning of his pieces? In chess, guys, every move, we want to make our position slightly better until we eventually win the game. And here Buecker came up with a nice little shuffle of the pieces, a nice little maneuver with rook c8, rook c7, and rook d7, forming a battery with the queen on d8 and the rook on d7 attacking the d file. So now we see rook c8, and following c3, rook c7, followed by rook d7. And really the rook on d7 does two things. It defends the knight on d5, and it defends the pawn on b7. This rook is very active, and it's holding the position together. And following bishop d2, I mean, at least for me personally, this pin is a little bit annoying. The knight on d5 can't even move because it's pinned to the king on g8. So here Buecker wisely plays king g7, and after rook a d1 continues to hurl his pawns down the board with h5. And now we see c4 from Boris Spassky trying to get rid of this knight, and now Buecker plays knight bd4, activating the knight and putting some pressure on d3. Now here Spassky played a3. And it seems as if, at least when I first watched this game, that black could just take the pawn on d3. I mean, what is Spassky doing here? But knight takes d3 would actually be a huge mistake, because after bishop takes d3, we take with the rook, and now the killing queen takes d3, a stunning move, because of the idea of bishop c3 check, attacking the king on g7, and attacking the queen on d3. And now we have to give up our queen. And here in this position, white is up the exchange, and also the black pawns are a little bit exposed in this position. h5, g5, f4. The pawns are definitely a little bit exposed up this far on the board. And on top of that, we have very strong rooks on e1 and d1, not to mention the advantage in development. So this would be a completely losing game for black. So Buecker wisely didn't take the pawn on d3, but instead continued to play attacking chess against the king on g1, playing g4. And after a takes b4, not taking the pawn back, but playing g takes f3, taking the knight, and now threatening to take the bishop on e2. So we see bishop takes f3, and now c takes b4, and following bishop takes f4, Here Buecker doesn't play a passive move like bishop g6 or bishop e6, but plays bishop takes h3, snatching a pawn off the board, further exposing the king on g1 and attacking the bishop on f4. And g takes h3 is actually a decent option for white, but I can totally see why Spassky was not big on this, because now black can play rook takes f4, and after bishop takes h5, knight d4, attacking the queen on b3, followed by the move bishop h4. And if you plug this into a computer, it shows that white has a clear advantage, but I can definitely see why Spassky was not big on this, because black has such a clamp on the dark squares with the knight on d4, a rook on f4, and a bishop on h4. So now, after bishop takes h3, we see bishop e3 from the former world champion, and now another crazy move from the Fide Master, rook takes f3, just giving all the pieces away possible to expose the king on g1. And after g takes f3, we now have knight e5 attacking the pawn on f3. And guys, there's really not an easy way for white to defend this pawn. I mean, looking at the move knight d2, now black could take the pawn on d3. And following queen c2, play bishop c5, very active move, putting pressure on the bishop on e3. And if bishop takes c5, well, now the g5 square has become loose. So we have queen g5 check, queen g2, and game over. Needless to say, this is a very hard position for white, and I'd give the clear attacking edge to black. So here Spassky actually played really resourceful, creative chess. The king would love to come to g2, but obviously this isn't allowed because the bishop on h3. So here Spassky plays king h2, a resourceful move, attacking the bishop on h3, and after bishop f5, then brings the king to g2. And now from the Fide Master, we see queen f8, looking to eye that pawn on f3, bringing bishop h3 check ideas into the game. So now we see f4 from the former world champion, attacking the knight on e5. But this allows black to play knight takes d3, taking the pawn. And the pawn on d3 was actually vital for white's position because it defended the knight on e4. But obviously now there's nothing defending that knight. So if rook takes d3 is played, we can just take the knight with check, take the rook, and black has a clearly won game with a piece ahead. So instead we see knight g3 from Boris Spassky, and now knight takes e1 check, snatching off the rook, followed by another Elephant Gambit type move, h4, just continuing to hurl pawns down the board. And after knight takes f5 check, we see queen takes f5, and now white is in an interesting situation. Now this queen on b3 isn't really doing much. I mean, the queen's attacking the pawn on b4, which is already defended by the bishop. It can't even come to c3 and attack the king because the pawn on b4. And on top of that, the queen isn't really a good defender. So here Spassky played bishop d4 check, hoping to get this queen back into the game. But I actually think this was a mistake, because here the Fide Master could have just took the bishop on d4. And yes, white can take the bishop on e7, but we now have king f6 attacking the rook, and after queen e3, play queen g4 check, followed by queen takes f4, and now we have a winning rook endgame. We're going to take on f2, attack the king on h2, next take the pawn on b2, and here black has a simply won rook endgame. But honestly, after all the attacking chess that black has played, I don't really blame the Fide Master for not taking the bishop. Here he plays king h7, hoping to keep attacking chances alive, and now after the move queen e3, defending the pawn on e4, we see bishop d6 attacking it. Now we have a double attack on that pawn on f4. So now we see bishop e5 basically getting in the way of the attack. And following bishop takes e5 and f takes e5, now from the Fide Master Buecker, we see rook g7 check. Great move. In chess, you want your rooks on open files, especially attacking the opponent's king or queen. So rook g7 is a really nice move, just a basic move attacking the king on g2. And now after king h2, here we see rook g6. Why on earth would Buecker play rook g6? Well, now white's actually threatening to play queen e4. And if white can get queen e4 in, I actually really like white's game. I mean, let's just take a look. Let's say black plays a move like b6. Well, now we have queen e4 attacking the queen. And if queen takes e4 and rook takes e4, now black is in a tough situation. White's attacking the pawn on h4, and also has a very strong on e5 ready to hurl down the board. So obviously black does not want to allow this. Instead we see the move rook g6, and now black has some queen g4 ideas looking to creep into the board. But now Spassky plays queen e4, hoping to not allow black to play queen g4, and it does stop this, but this was actually a huge blunder on part of the world champion, as now the pawn on f2 is hanging. So we see queen takes f2 a check, and after king h1, Buecker plays queen g3, threatening queen h3 with checkmate, and after queen takes b7 and king h6, here Spassky resigned the game because there's just no way to stop queen h3 with checkmate. Great game by the Fide Master and great attacking chess coming out of the Elephant Gambit. If you'd like to see more on the theory behind the Elephant Gambit, click the video to the left. If you'd like to explore more chess openings in general, click the playlist to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see on this channel, and as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.